So the Carabao Cup semi-finals are revealed. It will be Chelsea versus Arsenal and the holders Newcastle United taking on Manchester City, and the two finalists will meet each other at Wembley in just a few months. Now, obviously the last of the quarterfinals was taking place, of course, Arsenal against Crystal Palace, and Arsenal gaining a victory on penalties. Now, obviously I did watch that Arsenal Palace game. It was an interesting one. For me personally, I would say Arsenal just edged it. I think Palace were the strongest in the second half. Arsenal were definitely the strongest in the first half, and I think the penalty shootout just kind of cancelled each other out a bit. But I did see some worry in Arsenal as Palace started to take more control of that game going forward. And there was a bit of worry for me. The big thing that I was worried about, and this is something that I looked at going into this game, and it was a big thing for me from an Arsenal perspective, which was substitutions. I fully respect the fact that Arteta had strength in depth on the bench. Quite a lot of that team were players that were pretty much bench warmers in the Premier League at the moment, and players that were going to start week in, week out in the league and probably the Champions League. So they were giving them a run out. And that's exactly what Arteta's big thing was with some supporters. He needed to, utilise his whole squad, and that's what you got a squad for. You utilise the whole squad. My big thing is, yes, you're going to try and maybe add a second goal at that point, but you're bringing on Saka, Odegaard, you're later bringing on Rice as well. The weird thing for me was he took a striker off and brought a defensive midfielder on. That, for me, signalled to me that he wanted to just see out the 1-0 win, and it actually cost him in the end because Palace went on to equalise, and it took it to penalty. So Arsenal very nearly went out of that whole situation because Palace had plenty of chances before and after the equaliser to win the game as well. So it could have been a massive mistake, but it only just paid off. Well, I wouldn't say paid off, it only just saw them through. And then the penalty shootout came. Kepa's got a decent record on penalties, so at some point he was going to save it, and it ended up being I believe the guy whose penalty was saved was Lacroix, and and there was pictures post match of him smiling with Eze, I think it is, and that was circulating a bit online as well, and some of that chat was circulating online and social media, and people saying, oh, he's taking it like a joke and things like that, joking this, that, the other. And I don't know, from a Palace perspective, I'm sure they might be mad at that, and I think Palace fans will be quite angry with that situation, unless it was just a personal kind of one-on-one joke between Eze and Lacroix about their own situation. So, taking all that aside, like I said, in terms of the match itself, Arsenal for me did edge it. With the penalty shootout, I thought all the penalties were taken, barring the one that was saved by Kepa, were decent penalties. A couple went near towards the post, but overall it was a decent enough penalty shootout. Good passion on display from the Arsenal players and the Palace players as well. Mateta getting his arms up towards the fans on the other side, getting them fired up, earlier in the shootout. And Arsenal, for me, definitely deserved it overall. Like I say, I think Arsenal was stronger in the first half. Palace definitely became stronger in the second half. Now, when you look at the semi-finals, as we said, Newcastle will be facing Manchester City and Chelsea will face Arsenal. Of course, the first leg for Chelsea-Arsenal will be at Stamford Bridge, with the second leg being at the Emirates Stadium. For Newcastle versus Manchester City, the first leg will in fact be at the St James's Park in Newcastle, and Manchester City will host the second leg on the week commencing January the 2nd. Now, obviously, in terms of who I think will be finalists this year, you can't rule out Newcastle. They are the holders of this competition. They will fight for it. For me, they're coming up against the hardest opponent in the competition. I think Manchester City have really come into form the past few weeks. From a league perspective, they could take that into the Cup. For me, in terms of when I look at who the favourites are to win this competition, I would have to say Manchester City, because I think they're the informed team going into this competition from other competition experiences. Newcastle, for me, have had patchy form here and there overall, but they are the holders of the competition. You can't rule them out. They've got an opportunity to really salvage something here. Arsenal, they're top of the league, they're top of the Champions League, but the past few weeks, I think the performances overall have had to be escaped by the results. And what I mean by that is I think the results kind of got them out of it for the past few weeks. Don't get me wrong, when you watch them against Spurs, when you watch them against Bayern Munich, Arsenal play scintillating football. They do. 100% they do this season. When Eze's on his game, he's flying. When Gyökeres is getting service, he can score goals. When Saka puts in beautiful crosses, which he has done this season, he's a creative genius. I thought one of the best players for Arsenal against Palace yesterday was Gabriel Martinelli. I thought he had a brilliant game. And yes, Odegaard is the player that recycles possession. He's not really, for me, an out-and-out attacking midfielder. He, for me, is more of an 8-10 crossover, where he comes forward, but then if need to, he can recycle possession under pressure if need be. So Arsenal have strength in depth, and I think they do have an opportunity to win this competition. And I do think they need to take it seriously, which I'm hoping they do. You know, when you see Palace go in with their pretty much one of their strongest lineups, barring the goalkeeper Dean Henderson, but mind you, the goalkeeper for Crystal Palace on the night did fantastic. And, you know, Arsenal making 8 changes, rotating the entire squad. It shows the difference in depth between Arsenal and Palace. And that's even Palace, who've just come off an FA Cup winning season last season. So I think it's clear from a Palace perspective they need bodies. But then when you look at who could win this competition now, Arsenal have the depth. But do they have the resilience and potentially even the luck from the past few weeks to get them across the line and get that League Cup under their belts? And then Arteta will have picked up one of each major cup competition in this country. The FA Cup, he's picked up the Community Shield a couple of times as well, but also needs that Carabao Cup. He needs that League Cup because then he can say that he has picked up the 2 major cup competitions in this country. And that, for me, is a big thing for Arteta's CV. And for me, that could be the thing, the turning point that spurs them on to continue playing great football, to push them further up towards a league title, potentially a Champions League title. But they've got some stiff competition. For me, City's the big title rival in the Premier League, and the likes of Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, they're going to be potential rivals for the Champions League title. And there could be an underdog here and there as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what Arsenal, from their perspective, Arsenal do. For me, the Carabao Cup favourites are Manchester City, because I feel like they're the most informed team going into these semi-finals. Newcastle, for me, can't rule them out. Chelsea can pick up results if need be. I don't think they've been on the greatest run of form ever, but when they pick up results, they pick up results, and that's what you need at this early stage. And I think that in a cup semi-final, Chelsea need to be smart about this. They host the first leg at Stamford Bridge. They need to be very, very smart about this. They need to be picking up the form from the first leg, because Arsenal will give it everything they've got in the second leg. I'd be worried if Arsenal didn't give all they got in the second leg at the Emirates Stadium, whether they're in front leading into the second leg or they're behind leading into the second leg. So if I was to predict a final right here, right now for this Carabao Cup this year, or 2026, it would probably be Manchester City versus Arsenal. On paper, it'd be Manchester City versus Arsenal. However, it wouldn't surprise me if we had a Newcastle-Arsenal final, or we had a Newcastle-Chelsea final, or even a Manchester City-Chelsea final. And I think that would be very interesting. I think a City-Chelsea final would be a very interesting predicament, especially considering the fact that Enzo Maresca in the past week or so has been linked to potentially taking over from Pep Guardiola if this is indeed his last season at Manchester City. So if I was to give you a winner, it would be Manchester City. If I was to give you a final on paper, it would be Manchester City versus Arsenal. If I was to give you some potential dark horse finals, it would be the other ones. It would be Newcastle-Chelsea, Newcastle-Arsenal, or even Manchester City-Chelsea. And Manchester City-Chelsea would be an interesting final, and I would be intrigued to see how that would end up. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Stay tuned for more content right here on PT Sports, and from everyone here, Merry Christmas.